The fluorescent lights hummed overhead in the security control room as Marcus Thompson adjusted his headset for the third time that evening. At 52 years old, he had spent nearly 2 decades working night shifts at various high-security facilities, but nothing quite compared to the complexity of monitoring Clarence House. The Georgian mansion, serving as the official residence of members of the British royal family, required a level of vigilance that went far beyond typical security protocols. Marcus glanced at the bank of monitors displaying feeds from dozens of cameras positioned throughout the property. Each screen showed a different angle of the meticulously maintained grounds, the elegant corridors, and the various offices where staff members worked late into the evening. The timestamp in the corner read 11:47 p.m., and the building had settled into its usual nighttime rhythm. The security team consisted of 12 personnel, working in rotating shifts, with Marcus serving as the lead night supervisor. His colleagues respected his attention to detail and his ability to spot irregularities that others might miss. Tonight, however, something felt different. There was an undercurrent of tension in the air that Marcus couldn't quite identify. Earlier that day, there had been whispered conversations among the daytime staff about increased security measures and additional background checks. The official word from management was that these were routine updates to existing protocols, but Marcus had been in the security business long enough to recognize when something more significant was happening behind the scenes. As he reviewed the evening's incident reports, Marcus noticed that several staff members had been working unusually late. The cleaning crew had finished their rounds by 10 o'clock, as scheduled, but lights remained on in 3 different offices on the second floor. This wasn't entirely unusual, as senior staff members often worked extended hours, but the combination of offices staying active simultaneously struck him as noteworthy. The radio crackled to life, and Marcus heard the voice of Sarah Chen, one of the perimeter guards. "Control room. This is Perimeter 2. I'm seeing some unusual electromagnetic readings on my scanner. Nothing that triggers the main alarms, but the levels are higher than normal." Marcus pressed the transmit button on his radio. "Perimeter 2. Can you be more specific about the location and nature of these readings?" "It's coming from the East Wing, 2nd floor," Sarah replied. "The signal appears to be intermittent, strongest around the administrative offices. Should I investigate further?" Marcus considered the situation carefully. The East Wing housed several important administrative functions, including the private secretary's offices and the communications department. If there were unusual electromagnetic signals in that area, it could indicate anything from malfunctioning equipment to something more concerning. "Maintain your current position. Perimeter 2. I'm going to run some additional diagnostics from the control room and then come take a look myself." Marcus turned his attention to the sophisticated monitoring equipment that lined the control room. Beyond the standard security cameras and alarm systems, Clarence House was equipped with advanced electronic surveillance detection equipment. This technology was designed to identify unauthorized recording devices, transmitters, and other electronic surveillance equipment that might pose a security risk. He activated the electronic countermeasure system and began running a comprehensive sweep of the East Wing. The results appeared on a specialized monitor that displayed electromagnetic signatures throughout the building. Most areas showed the expected baseline readings, with slight variations where authorized electronic equipment was located. However, as the sweep focused on the 2nd floor of the East Wing, Marcus noticed an anomaly. There was a distinct signal pattern emanating from the area near the private secretary's office suite. The signal was weak but consistent, with characteristics that suggested it might be a transmission device of some kind. Marcus frowned as he studied the readout more carefully. The signal wasn't matching any of the authorized electronic devices that were supposed to be operating in that area. According to his records, the private secretary's office contained standard computer equipment, phones, and a few authorized monitoring devices, but nothing that should generate this particular type of electromagnetic signature. He reached for his secure phone and dialed the number for Detective Inspector James Richardson of the Metropolitan Police's Specialist Protection Command. Richardson was the liaison officer responsible for coordinating security matters related to the royal family, and Marcus had worked with him on several previous occasions. "Richardson here!" came the crisp voice on the other end of the line. "Inspector, this is Marcus Thompson at Clarence House. I'm calling to report a potential security concern. We're detecting unauthorized electromagnetic signals in the East Wing administrative area." There was a brief pause before Richardson responded. "What kind of signals, Marcus? and how certain are you that they're unauthorized? The signals are consistent with small electronic devices, possibly transmitters or recording equipment. I've cross-referenced them with all authorized electronics in the area, and there's no match. The signals are intermittent but persistent, suggesting they're battery-powered devices. Richardson's tone became more serious. I'm going to dispatch a specialist team immediately. In the meantime, I need you to maintain surveillance of the area without alerting anyone to the situation. Can you do that without compromising security? Absolutely. I'll continue monitoring from the control room and document everything. Should I restrict access to the area? Not yet. We don't want to tip off anyone who might be responsible. Just keep detailed records of everyone who enters or exits the East Wing and let me know immediately if the signal patterns change. Marcus ended the call and returned his attention to the monitors. The electromagnetic signature was still present, and if anything, it seemed to be growing slightly stronger. This suggested that whatever device was generating the signal might be actively transmitting data. He began pulling up the access logs for the East Wing, focusing on the past week. The computer system tracked everyone who used their security cards to enter different areas of the building, providing a comprehensive record of movement throughout Clarence House. As Marcus reviewed the logs, several patterns began to emerge. The private secretary's office suite had been accessed by the usual staff members during normal business hours, but there had also been several after-hours entries by cleaning staff, maintenance personnel, and a few administrative workers. One name appeared more frequently than others in the after-hours access logs: Diana Walsh, a senior administrative assistant who had been with the royal household for nearly 8 years. Her access pattern over the past week showed that she had been staying late almost every evening, often until well past midnight. Marcus pulled up Diana's personnel file on his computer. Her background check had been thoroughly completed when she was first hired, and there had been no security incidents involving her during her tenure. She had a reputation as a dedicated employee who often worked extended hours to ensure that important administrative tasks were completed on time. However, as Marcus studied her recent access patterns more carefully, he noticed something unusual. While Diana's late-night presence in the building was well documented, the specific timing of her movements through different areas didn't always align with what would be expected for her normal duties. On 3 separate occasions over the past week, Diana had accessed the private secretary's office suite at times when no other staff members were present. These late-night visits typically lasted between 30 and 45 minutes, which seemed excessive for routine administrative tasks that could normally be completed during regular business hours. Marcus made detailed notes about Diana's access patterns and cross-referenced them with the times when the electromagnetic signals were strongest. There appeared to be a correlation, though it wasn't definitive enough to draw firm conclusions. The radio crackled again, and Sarah's voice came through. "Control room, the electromagnetic readings are showing increased activity. Whatever's generating the signal seems to be transmitting more data than before." Marcus acknowledged the transmission and made another entry in his incident log. The situation was becoming more concerning by the minute. If someone had indeed planted surveillance devices in the private secretary's office, it represented a serious breach of security that could compromise sensitive information about the royal family's activities and schedules. He decided to conduct a more detailed review of the security camera footage from the past week, focusing specifically on the times when Diana Walsh had been in the East Wing after hours. The high-resolution cameras throughout the building recorded continuously, providing a comprehensive visual record of all activities. Marcus began reviewing footage from 3 nights earlier, when Diana had accessed the private secretary's office at 11:30 p.m. and remained there until just after midnight. On the video, he could see her entering the office suite with her security card and proceeding to the main administrative area. The camera angle allowed Marcus to observe Diana's general movements within the office, though the resolution wasn't sufficient to see exactly what she was doing at her desk or with specific equipment. She appeared to be working at her computer for most of the time, which would be consistent with her stated responsibilities for preparing reports and correspondence. However, about 20 minutes into her visit, Diana moved away from her usual workstation and spent several minutes in a different part of the office. This area wasn't covered by the main security camera, so Marcus couldn't see exactly what she was doing during that time. When Diana returned to her workstation, she seemed to be carrying something small in her hand, though the camera angle and lighting made it impossible to identify what it might be. She worked for another 15 minutes before gathering her belongings and leaving the office. Marcus made detailed notes about the timeline and began reviewing similar footage from other nights when Diana had worked late. The pattern was remarkably consistent. She would arrive, work at her computer for a period of time, spend 10 to 20 minutes in the area that wasn't covered by the main camera, and then return to finish her work before leaving. The more Marcus studied the footage, the more convinced he became that Diana's activities warranted further investigation. While her behavior wasn't definitively suspicious, the correlation between her late-night presence and the electromagnetic signals was too significant to ignore. He reached for his secure phone again and called Inspector Richardson. "Inspector, I've been reviewing security footage and access logs. I think I may have identified a person of interest in connection with the electromagnetic signals." "Go ahead, Marcus." "Diana Walsh, Senior Administrative Assistant in the East Wing. She's been working late almost every night this week, and her movement patterns don't entirely match what you'd expect for routine administrative work. There's also a temporal correlation between her presence and the strongest signal readings." Richardson was quiet for a moment before responding. "I want you to continue monitoring the situation, but don't approach Miss Walsh directly. My specialist team is about 20 minutes away. Can you maintain surveillance until they arrive?" "Absolutely. I'll keep watching the monitors and documenting everything." As Marcus continued his surveillance, he noticed that the electromagnetic signals were becoming more intense. Whatever device was generating them appeared to be transmitting a significant amount of data, possibly uploading files or sending real-time information to an external location. The implications were troubling. If someone had successfully planted sophisticated surveillance equipment in the private secretary's office, they would have access to highly sensitive information about the royal family's schedules, security arrangements, and confidential communications. Marcus had worked in security long enough to know that this type of breach could have serious consequences that extended far beyond the immediate security of Clarence House. The information contained in the private secretary's office could potentially be used to compromise the safety and privacy of members of the royal family. He continued monitoring the situation, documenting every detail, and preparing comprehensive reports for the specialist team that would be arriving soon. The next few hours would be crucial in determining the extent of the security breach and identifying everyone who might be involved. As the clock approached midnight, Marcus realized that this night would mark a turning point in his career. The discovery of potential surveillance equipment in one of the most secure buildings in London represented exactly the kind of security challenge that he had trained for throughout his 20-year career. The fluorescent lights continued humming overhead as Marcus maintained his vigilant watch over the monitors, knowing that the real investigation was just beginning. Whatever was happening in the East Wing of Clarence House, he was determined to uncover the truth and protect the security of everyone who lived and worked in the historic building. The electromagnetic signals continued their steady transmission as the night wore on, carrying with them secrets that someone desperately wanted to steal and that Marcus was equally determined to protect. The midnight security breach was about to become much more complicated than anyone could have imagined. Detective Inspector James Richardson arrived at Clarence House 23 minutes after Marcus Thompson's second phone call. The specialist team accompanying him consisted of 4 highly trained technicians from the Metropolitan Police's counter-surveillance unit, each carrying sophisticated electronic detection equipment that would make Marcus's building systems look elementary by comparison. Richardson was a lean man in his early 40s, with sharp gray eyes that missed very little. He had spent the better part of 15 years working various aspects of royal protection, and he understood the delicate balance between thoroughness and discretion that such investigations required. Marcus met the team at the staff entrance and quickly briefed them on everything he had observed since the initial detection of the electromagnetic signals. Richardson listened intently, asking pointed questions about the timing, signal strength, and Diana Walsh's movement patterns. "Show me the control room first," Richardson said. "I want to see exactly what your equipment is detecting before we move into the field." The group made their way through the quiet corridors to the security control center. Marcus demonstrated the electromagnetic surveillance system and showed Richardson the readings that had first alerted him to the potential problem. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, the lead technician from the counter-surveillance unit, studied the readouts with professional interest. She was a compact woman with graying hair and the kind of focused intensity that came from years of hunting electronic surveillance devices in high-stakes environments. "These readings are definitely consistent with active transmission devices," Dr. Hayes confirmed. "The signal pattern suggests multiple devices, probably small and battery-powered. Whoever placed them knew what they were doing. Richardson nodded grimly. How sophisticated are we talking about? Professional-grade equipment, Dr. Hayes replied. Not something you could pick up at an electronics store. These devices are designed to be difficult to detect and capable of transmitting high-quality audio or data over significant distances. Marcus pulled up the security footage from Diana Walsh's recent late-night visits. The team watched carefully as Diana moved through the office suite, paying particular attention to the periods when she disappeared from the main camera's view. That area where she's not visible. Richardson pointed to the monitor. What's located there? Marcus consulted his building schematics. It's a smaller office space used for filing and document storage. There are also several communication junction boxes in that area where phone and internet lines connect to the rest of the building. Hayes looked up from her equipment. Communication junction boxes would be ideal locations for surveillance devices. They provide both power sources and direct access to data transmission lines. Richardson made a decision. We need to get into that office suite and conduct a physical sweep. Marcus, what's Diana Walsh's schedule? Is she likely to be here tonight? Marcus checked the staff scheduling system. According to the record, she's not scheduled to work tonight. But based on her pattern over the past week, there's a good chance she'll show up anyway. We can't wait to see if she appears, Richardson said. Every minute these devices remain active, more sensitive information could be compromised. Hayes, I want your team to conduct a comprehensive sweep of the entire East Wing, starting with the private secretary's office suite. The specialist team gathered their equipment and prepared to move. Their electronic detection devices were considerably more sophisticated than the building's standard security systems, capable of identifying even the most carefully concealed surveillance equipment. As they prepared to leave the control room, Marcus's radio crackled with a transmission from Sarah Chen, still on perimeter duty. Control room, I've got a vehicle approaching the main gate. Single occupant, appears to be staff. Marcus activated the external camera system and identified the approaching vehicle. His stomach tightened as he recognized Diana Walsh's small blue sedan pulling up to the security checkpoint. Inspector, Marcus said urgently, Diana Walsh just arrived. Richardson considered the situation quickly. This could work in our favor. If she's here to service the surveillance devices or retrieve data, we might be able to catch her in the act. Marcus, I want you to monitor her movements from the control room. My team will position themselves strategically throughout the building. Dr. Hayes and her technicians quickly deployed to various locations in the East Wing, taking care to remain out of sight while maintaining communication with the control room. Richardson positioned himself in a corridor where he could observe the entrance to the private secretary's office suite without being seen. Marcus watched on his monitors as Diana cleared the security checkpoint and entered the building. She moved through the corridors with the confidence of someone who belonged there, using her access card to enter the East Wing just as she had on previous nights. She's heading directly to the office suite, Marcus reported over the radio. No deviation from her usual pattern. Dr. Hayes's voice came through the communication system. I'm reading increased electromagnetic activity. Multiple devices just became more active, probably responding to some kind of activation signal. On the security monitor, Marcus could see Diana entering the main office area. She moved to her usual workstation and powered on her computer, just as she had on previous nights. For the first 15 minutes, her behavior appeared completely normal. However, Dr. Hayes continued reporting increased electronic activity. Whatever's happening, the surveillance devices are transmitting significantly more data than they were earlier. This looks like a scheduled data upload. Richardson's voice was tense over the radio. Can you determine what kind of data is being transmitted? It's encrypted, but the volume suggests file transfers rather than just audio surveillance. Someone is accessing and downloading significant amounts of information from the building's systems. Marcus watched as Diana worked at her computer. From the camera angle, it appeared that she was performing routine administrative tasks, but Dr. Hayes's electronic readings told a different story. After 20 minutes of apparent normal work, Diana stood up and moved toward the area that wasn't covered by the main security camera. This was the moment that Marcus and Richardson had been waiting for. She's moving to the blind spot, Marcus reported. Dr. Hayes, are you in position to observe that area? Negative, but I'm reading a spike in transmission activity. She's definitely interacting with the surveillance devices. Richardson made his decision. We're moving in. All units, converge on the private secretary's office suite. Marcus, activate the recording systems and document everything. The next few minutes unfolded with the precision of a well-rehearsed operation. Richardson and his team moved swiftly, but quietly through the corridors, while Dr. Hayes monitored the electronic signatures to ensure that no evidence would be destroyed. Marcus watched from the control room as the specialist team approached the office suite. On his monitors, he could see Diana still in the area not covered by the main camera, apparently unaware that her activities had been detected. Richardson reached the office entrance first and carefully positioned himself to observe Diana through the doorway. What he saw confirmed their suspicions. Diana was kneeling beside a communication junction box, connecting a small handheld device to what appeared to be sophisticated surveillance equipment concealed within the utility panel. Target confirmed, Richardson whispered into his radio. Subject is actively interfacing with surveillance devices. Moving to apprehend. Richardson entered the office with his identification clearly visible. Diana Walsh, I'm Detective Inspector Richardson with the Metropolitan Police. Please step away from the equipment and keep your hands where I can see them. Diana's reaction was immediate and telling. Instead of confusion or surprise, her face showed the resignation of someone who had been caught in the act. She slowly stood up, raising her hands, but made no attempt to deny what she was doing. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough, Richardson replied. You're under arrest on suspicion of unauthorized surveillance and potential violations of the Official Secrets Act. Dr. Hayes, secure the equipment. Dr. Hayes and her team quickly moved to examine the surveillance devices that Diana had been accessing. What they found was more sophisticated than anyone had expected. Inspector, this is a comprehensive surveillance network, Dr. Hayes reported. Multiple audio recording devices, at least 2 video cameras, and what appears to be a device capable of intercepting electronic communications. This equipment has been in place for several weeks, maybe longer. The handheld device that Diana had been using contained encrypted files that would require significant analysis, but the preliminary examination suggested that large amounts of confidential information had been compromised. Richardson looked at Diana, who was now sitting quietly in a chair under the watchful eye of one of his team members. Who are you working for, Diana? This kind of equipment doesn't come cheap, and it's not something you could have obtained or installed on your own. Diana remained silent, but her demeanor suggested that she was weighing her options carefully. After several minutes, she spoke. I want to speak with a lawyer before I say anything else. That's your right, Richardson acknowledged. But I want you to understand the seriousness of what we're dealing with here. This isn't just about surveillance. You've potentially compromised the safety and security of the royal family. The charges you're facing could result in a very lengthy prison sentence. As Diana was being read her rights and prepared for transport to a secure facility for questioning, Dr. Hayes continued her analysis of the surveillance equipment. The sophistication of the devices and their strategic placement suggested that this operation had been planned and executed by professionals with significant resources. Inspector, Dr. T.S. Hayes called out. I think you need to see this. Richardson joined her beside the communication junction box where the main surveillance hub was concealed. Dr. Servia, Hayes pointed to a small component that had been carefully integrated into the building's existing communication infrastructure. This device has been intercepting all electronic communications passing through this junction point. That includes phone calls, emails, and data transmissions from multiple offices in this wing of the building. The implications were staggering. The surveillance network hadn't just been recording conversations in the private secretary's office, it had been capturing all electronic communications from a significant portion of Clarence House's administrative operations. Richardson realized that they were dealing with an intelligence operation that went far beyond a single compromised employee. The level of planning, the sophisticated equipment, and the strategic placement of surveillance devices all pointed to a well-funded and professionally organized effort. Marcus, Richardson called into his radio. I need you to pull complete access records for the past 3 months. Anyone who had access to the East Wing during off hours, including maintenance staff, cleaning crews, and contractors. Already on it, Inspector. I'll have a comprehensive list ready within the hour. As the immediate scene was secured and Diana Walsh was taken into custody, Richardson began to comprehend the full scope of the investigation that lay ahead. The surveillance network that had been discovered was likely just the tip of the iceberg. Dr. Hayes approached with her preliminary analysis of the handheld device. The encrypted files on this device contain what appears to be months of recorded conversations, intercepted emails, and document files. Based on the file sizes and timestamps, whoever is behind this has been gathering intelligence on royal household operations for quite some time. Richardson nodded grimly. How much data are we talking about? Gigabytes of information, phone conversations, meeting recordings, correspondence, schedules, security protocols. If this data has been transmitted to unauthorized parties, it represents one of the most serious security breaches in recent royal household history. The night that had begun with Marcus Thompson detecting unusual electromagnetic signals had evolved into a major counterintelligence investigation. As Richardson surveyed the sophisticated surveillance equipment that his team was carefully documenting and removing, he realized that Diana Walsh was almost certainly not the mastermind behind this operation. Someone with significant resources and professional intelligence capabilities had orchestrated this breach, using Diana as their inside operative to maintain and service the surveillance network. The question now was who was behind it and how much damage had already been done. Richardson made a call to his superiors, knowing that the next phase of the investigation would require resources and expertise that went beyond his immediate team. The midnight security breach at Clarence House had revealed something much larger and more threatening than anyone had initially suspected. As dawn began to break over London, the true magnitude of the security compromise was just beginning to come into focus. The investigation that would follow would reveal connections and implications that no one could have anticipated when Marcus Thompson first noticed those unusual electromagnetic readings in the quiet hours of the night. The secure interrogation facility at New Scotland Yard buzzed with activity as the sun rose over London. Diana Walsh sat across from Detective Inspector Richardson in a windowless room, her solicitor beside her reviewing the extensive documentation that had been compiled overnight. The gravity of the charges she faced was becoming increasingly clear as more evidence emerged from the analysis of the surveillance equipment. Richardson studied Diana carefully as he prepared to begin the formal interrogation. At 34 years old, she had worked her way up through the administrative ranks of the royal household with what had appeared to be genuine dedication and competence. Her personnel file showed no red flags, no financial difficulties, and no obvious vulnerabilities that would typically make someone a target for recruitment by hostile intelligence services. "Diana," Richardson began, "we've had teams working through the night analyzing the equipment you were servicing. What we found goes far beyond anything we initially suspected. I'm going to give you one opportunity to cooperate fully and help us understand how this operation was organized." Diana's solicitor, Margaret Chen, a sharp-featured woman in her 50s who specialized in national security cases, leaned forward. "My client is willing to listen to what you have to say, but any cooperation will depend on what assurances you can provide regarding the charges she's facing." Richardson opened a thick folder containing preliminary analysis reports from Dr. Hayes and her technical team. "The surveillance network we discovered has been active for at least 4 months. During that time, it captured thousands of hours of conversations, intercepted hundreds of confidential emails, and recorded sensitive information about royal family schedules and security procedures." He placed several photographs on the table showing the sophisticated equipment that had been concealed throughout the East Wing. This level of technical sophistication required professional installation and ongoing maintenance. The equipment alone would have cost tens of thousands of pounds, and it required someone with detailed knowledge of Clarence House's security systems and communication infrastructure. Diana remained silent, but Richardson could see that the weight of evidence was affecting her. Her hands trembled slightly as she looked at the photographs, and her breathing had become more rapid. "We know you didn't plan this operation alone," Richardson continued. "The question is whether you're going to help us identify the people who recruited you, or whether you're going to take full responsibility for an intelligence operation that was clearly organized by others." Margaret Chen whispered something to Diana, who nodded and then looked directly at Richardson. "What kind of assurances are you prepared to offer?" Richardson had anticipated this question. "That depends entirely on the quality and completeness of the information you provide. If you help us identify the people behind this operation and assist in preventing further security breaches, the Crown Prosecution Service would be willing to consider reduced charges." Diana was quiet for several minutes, clearly wrestling with the decision. Finally, she spoke. "I need you to understand that I never intended for this to go as far as it did. When it started, I thought I was just providing some basic information about scheduling and administrative procedures." "Who approached you initially?" Richardson asked. "A man named Peter Morrison. He said he was a journalist working on a book about the modern royal household. He offered to pay me for occasional insights about how things worked behind the scenes. Nothing that seemed particularly sensitive at first." Richardson made notes as Diana spoke, but he was already skeptical of her account. Professional intelligence operations often began with seemingly innocent requests for information, gradually escalating until the target was completely compromised. "How did Morrison contact you?" "He approached me at a coffee shop near Clarence House about 6 months ago. Said he'd been recommended by someone who knew I worked for the royal household. He was very charming, well-dressed, and seemed genuinely interested in writing an accurate account of royal administration." "What kind of information did he initially request?" Diana shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Just general things at first. How many people worked in different departments, what the daily routines were like, how decisions were made about public events. Nothing that seemed classified or particularly sensitive." Richardson knew that this was a classic intelligence recruitment pattern. The initial request would have been designed to establish a relationship and assess Diana's willingness to share information, while gradually normalizing the idea of providing inside access to royal household operations. "When did Morrison start asking for more specific information?" "It was gradual. After about 6 weeks of occasional meetings, he started asking about specific schedules and meetings. He said he wanted to understand how the royal household responded to current events and political developments." Richardson consulted his notes. 6 weeks would put us at about 4.5 months ago, which aligns with our technical analysis of when the surveillance equipment was installed. "Did Morrison ever suggest that you provide him with access to Clarence House?" Diana hesitated, recognizing that her answer would mark a crucial point in her level of culpability. "He never explicitly asked me to do anything illegal, but he did suggest that it would be helpful if he could get a better sense of the physical environment where these administrative decisions were made." "And you interpreted this as a request to help him gain unauthorized access to the building?" "Not exactly. He suggested that if there were ever opportunities for him to visit during off hours, perhaps for a brief tour that wouldn't interfere with normal operations, it would help him write more accurately about the work environment." Margaret Chen interjected. "My client wants to emphasize that she believed she was assisting with legitimate journalistic research, not participating in illegal surveillance." Richardson nodded but continued his questioning. "Diana, when you provided Morrison with access to Clarence House, what exactly did you show him?" "It wasn't really access in the way you're suggesting. I stayed late one evening and gave him a brief tour of some of the administrative areas, just the offices and conference rooms where routine business is conducted." "This would have been approximately 4 months ago?" "Yes, sometime in early October." Richardson pulled out building schematics and pointed to the east wing. "Did your tour include this area where the surveillance equipment was later discovered?" Diana looked at the schematics and nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but I only showed him the general office layouts and explained how different departments coordinated their work." "Did Morrison show particular interest in any specific areas?" "He asked a lot of questions about the communication systems and how information flowed between different offices. He seemed especially interested in understanding how confidential information was handled and protected." Richardson realized that Morrison had used this tour to conduct detailed reconnaissance for the surveillance operation. Diana's seemingly innocent cooperation had provided him with exactly the information he needed to plan the installation of the surveillance network. "After this tour, did your relationship with Morrison change?" Diana was becoming visibly distressed as she recognized the implications of her actions. "He started paying me more money and asking for more specific information, but he also became more controlling. He made it clear that he expected me to be available when he needed information." "Did he ever threaten you?" "Not directly, but he let me know that he had recorded our conversations and had evidence of my cooperation with his research. He suggested that if I tried to end our arrangement, it might cause problems for my career." Richardson understood that Diana had been professionally manipulated and gradually compromised, but he also needed to establish the full extent of her cooperation with the surveillance operation. Diana, I need you to tell me exactly when and how Morrison gained access to install the surveillance equipment. Diana was quiet for a long time before answering. About 3 weeks after the initial tour, Morrison said he needed to take some photographs and measurements to accompany his book. He asked if I could arrange for him to spend some time in the offices during evening hours when there would be fewer people around. And you provided this access? Yes. I told the security desk that I was working late and had a colleague helping me with some research projects. Morrison had identification that showed he worked for a publishing company. Richardson made a note to investigate the false identification that Morrison had used. How long was Morrison in the building during this visit? About 3 hours. He said he needed time to take detailed photographs and make accurate measurements of the office layouts. Were you with him during this entire period? Most of it, but not all. He said some of his work required him to focus without distractions, so I spent some time in my office while he worked in other areas. Richardson realized that this had been when Morrison installed the sophisticated surveillance equipment. Diana's cooperation had provided him with the access he needed, but her absence during portions of his visit had given him the opportunity to work without direct observation. After this installation visit, what was your ongoing role in the operation? Morrison said he needed me to check periodically to make sure his equipment was working properly. He gave me a small handheld device and showed me how to connect it to check the status of his recording equipment. How often did you perform these checks? Usually once or twice a week, always during evening hours when I was working late. Morrison said it was important to maintain the equipment regularly to ensure the quality of his research. Richardson was beginning to understand the full scope of Diana's involvement. While she may have initially believed she was assisting with legitimate journalism, her continued cooperation with maintaining sophisticated surveillance equipment demonstrated a level of culpability that would be difficult to minimize. Diana, did Morrison ever indicate who he was working for? Did you have any suspicions that this wasn't actually journalistic research? Diana looked at her solicitor before answering. Toward the end, I started to suspect that Morrison might not be exactly who he claimed to be. The equipment he was using seemed very advanced for a writer, and some of his questions were extremely detailed about security procedures and confidential communications. But you continued to cooperate? I was scared. Morrison made it clear that I was already deeply involved in what he called his project. He suggested that if I tried to withdraw my cooperation, I would face serious consequences both professionally and legally. Richardson understood that Diana had been effectively trapped in the operation, but he also needed to determine whether there were other staff members who had been compromised or were still working for Morrison's organization. Did Morrison ever ask you to recruit other staff members or gain access to areas outside your normal work responsibilities? He asked questions about other employees and their access to different parts of the building, but he never explicitly asked me to recruit anyone else. However, he did seem very interested in the schedules and responsibilities of people who worked in more senior positions. Margaret Chen spoke up. Inspector, my client has been very forthcoming about her involvement in this matter. What assurances can you provide that her cooperation will be taken into account? Richardson closed his folder and looked directly at Diana. Your cooperation has been helpful, but we need much more information before we can make any decisions about charges. We need complete details about every interaction with Morrison, copies of any communications you may have saved, and your assistance in developing a profile that will help us locate him. There's something else, Diana said quietly. Morrison mentioned that this wasn't his only project. He suggested that similar research was being conducted at other government facilities. Richardson felt a chill as he realized the implications of what Diana was suggesting. If Morrison was part of a larger intelligence operation targeting multiple government and royal facilities, the security breach at Clarence House might be just one component of a much more extensive espionage network. The interrogation continued for several more hours, with Diana providing increasingly detailed information about her interactions with Morrison and the surveillance operation. As the full picture emerged, Richardson began to understand that they were dealing with a sophisticated intelligence operation that had the potential to compromise the security of the entire royal household. As afternoon turned to evening, Richardson knew that the investigation was entering a new and more complex phase. The information provided by Diana Walsh was crucial, but it was also clear that Peter Morrison and whoever was directing his activities remained at large and potentially active in other locations. The midnight security breach that Marcus Thompson had detected was revealing itself to be part of something much larger and more dangerous than anyone had initially suspected. Commander Sarah Mitchell of the Metropolitan Police's Counter-Terrorism Command arrived at the secure briefing room in New Scotland Yard at precisely 7 o'clock the following morning. The urgency of the situation had prompted the involvement of multiple agencies, and Mitchell had been designated to coordinate the expanded investigation into what was now being treated as a potential matter of national security. Detective Inspector Richardson briefed Mitchell on the previous day's developments, including Diana Walsh's detailed confession and the technical analysis of the surveillance equipment that had been discovered at Clarence House. The implications of what Diana had revealed about Morrison's suggestions of similar operations at other facilities had elevated the investigation to a level requiring significant additional resources. "What's our current assessment of the scope of this operation?" Mitchell asked, studying the comprehensive files that Richardson's team had compiled. "Based on Diana Walsh's statements and our technical analysis, we're dealing with a professionally organized intelligence operation that has been active for at least 6 months," Richardson replied. "The sophistication of the equipment and the methodical approach to recruitment suggest involvement by a hostile foreign intelligence service." Mitchell nodded grimly. "Have we identified any leads on Peter Morrison's actual identity?" "Not yet. The identification he used to gain access to Clarence House was expertly forged, and we haven't been able to match his physical description to any known intelligence operatives in our databases. However, Diana provided enough detail about his appearance and behavior to develop a comprehensive profile." Dr. Elizabeth Hayes joined the briefing, carrying her preliminary analysis of the data that had been extracted from the surveillance equipment. "Commander, we've been able to decrypt some of the intercepted communications, and what we've found is extremely concerning." Mitchell gestured for Dr. Hayes to continue. "What kind of information was compromised?" "Complete transcripts of confidential conversations between senior royal household staff. Detailed schedules for royal family members, including private engagements, security protocol discussions, and correspondence with government officials. Essentially, several months' worth of highly sensitive information about royal family activities and security arrangements." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This level of intelligence compromise could potentially be used to threaten the safety of royal family members, or to embarrass the monarchy through the strategic release of private information. Mitchell made a decision. "We need to assume that this information has already been transmitted to hostile parties and act accordingly. Richardson, I want you to coordinate with Royal Protection Services to review all security protocols and make necessary adjustments. Dr. Hayes, I need a complete assessment of what other government facilities might be vulnerable to similar operations." Richardson consulted his notes from Diana's interrogation. Diana mentioned that Morrison made references to similar research at other government facilities. She didn't have specific details, but she got the impression that Clarence House wasn't his only target. "That aligns with intelligence we've been receiving from other sources," Mitchell said. "There have been reports of suspicious activities around several government buildings over the past few months, but nothing that raised immediate red flags. In light of what we've discovered here, those incidents are taking on new significance." Dr. Hayes pulled up a map of central London on her tablet. If Morrison's operation is part of a larger intelligence network, they would likely target facilities with overlapping security responsibilities. The logical targets would include Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, government ministries, and possibly key diplomatic facilities. Mitchell assigned additional teams to begin discrete investigations at each of these potential target locations. The challenge was conducting thorough security sweeps without alerting potential operatives that their activities had been detected. "What's our status with Diana Walsh?" Mitchell asked. "She's continuing to cooperate fully," Richardson replied. "Her solicitor is negotiating the terms of her cooperation agreement, but Diana seems genuinely committed to helping us identify other potential targets and understand Morrison's operational methods." "Is there any indication that other Clarence House staff members might be compromised?" "We're conducting discrete background checks on everyone who had access to the East Wing during the relevant time period. So far, Diana appears to be the only staff member who was directly recruited, but Morrison demonstrated considerable knowledge about internal procedures and personnel that suggests he may have had additional sources of information." Mitchell reviewed the personnel files that Richardson's team had flagged for additional investigation. What about external contractors, maintenance staff, and regular visitors? We're expanding the investigation to include anyone who had regular access to the building over the past 6 months. The sophisticated nature of Morrison's operations suggests he had detailed intelligence about building security, staff schedules, and internal procedures that would be difficult to obtain without multiple sources. Dr. Hayes presented her analysis of the technical aspects of the surveillance network. The equipment we discovered was state-of-the-art, designed for long-term covert operation. The power management systems, encryption capabilities, and transmission methods all indicate that this was planned as a permanent intelligence-gathering operation, not a short-term information grab. Mitchell studied the technical specifications. How difficult would it be for Morrison's organization to replicate this type of operation at other facilities? With the right inside access and sufficient planning time, they could establish similar networks at virtually any government building, Hayes replied. The key limiting factors are gaining initial access for installation and having someone on the inside to maintain the equipment. Richardson received a secure message on his encrypted phone and looked up with concern. Commander, we've got a development. Security teams at the Foreign Office have just reported discovering electromagnetic anomalies similar to what Marcus Thompson detected at Clarence House. Mitchell immediately activated the secure communication system to coordinate with the Foreign Office security team. Within minutes, it was confirmed that sophisticated surveillance equipment had been discovered in the building that housed some of Britain's most sensitive diplomatic communications. This confirms our worst fears, Mitchell said. We're dealing with a coordinated intelligence operation targeting multiple high-security government facilities. Richardson, I want Diana Walsh brought back for another round of questioning immediately. She may have information about Morrison's other activities that she hasn't yet shared. While Richardson arranged for Diana's return, Mitchell began coordinating with the Security Service and Government Communications Headquarters to assess the full scope of the potential intelligence breach. If similar surveillance networks had been established at multiple government facilities, the national security implications were staggering. Diana Walsh arrived at the secure facility within 2 hours, accompanied by her solicitor. The gravity of the situation was explained to both of them, and Diana was informed that her cooperation in the expanded investigation could significantly affect the charges she would ultimately face. Diana, Richardson began, we've discovered surveillance equipment at the Foreign Office that appears to be connected to Morrison's operation. I need you to think very carefully about every conversation you had with Morrison. Did he ever mention other projects, other people he was working with, or other government buildings? Diana appeared genuinely surprised by the revelation about the Foreign Office. He never specifically mentioned the Foreign Office, but he did ask me questions about how different government departments coordinated with the royal household. What kind of coordination questions? He wanted to understand how information flowed between the royal household and various government ministries. He seemed particularly interested in diplomatic protocols and how the royal family's international engagements were arranged. Mitchell joined the interrogation session. Diana, this is Commander Mitchell. The situation has become much more serious than when we first spoke yesterday. We now know that Morrison was part of a larger operation targeting multiple government facilities. Your cooperation could be crucial in helping us protect national security. I'll help however I can, Diana replied. But I want you to understand that Morrison never told me about operations at other locations. He was very careful about compartmentalizing information. Did Morrison ever introduce you to other people who were working with him? Not directly, but there were a few occasions when he received phone calls during our meetings. I got the impression he was reporting to someone else, but he never identified who it was. Richardson pressed for more details. What did you overhear from these phone calls? Morrison usually spoke quietly and moved away from me when he received calls, but I did hear him mention progress reports and timeline updates. He seemed to be working within a structured organization with specific deadlines and objectives. Dr. Hayes joined the session to ask technical questions about Morrison's equipment and procedures. Diana, when Morrison showed you how to service the surveillance equipment, did he ever mention how the information was being transmitted or where it was being sent? He said the equipment automatically transmitted data to secure servers, but he never gave me specific details about the locations or methods. He did mention that the system was designed to be resilient and redundant, which I assumed meant there were backup systems in case something went wrong. Mitchell realized that they were dealing with a sophisticated intelligence network with multiple layers of security and redundancy. The discovery of similar equipment at the Foreign Office suggested that Morrison's organization had successfully infiltrated multiple high-value targets. Diana, I need you to think about Morrison's behavior and comments during your final meetings with him. Did he seem concerned about security, or did he give any indication that he thought his operation might be discovered? Diana considered the question carefully. Over the past few weeks, Morrison did seem more cautious. He started insisting on meeting in different locations and became more paranoid about being observed. He also mentioned that his project was entering a new phase that would require less frequent contact with me. This information suggested that Morrison might have been preparing to conclude his operations at Clarence House, possibly because his organization had gathered sufficient intelligence or because they were concerned about potential discovery. Richardson asked, "Did Morrison ever provide you with any way to contact him directly? Or was he always the one who initiated meetings?"
He always contacted me first, usually by text message from different phone numbers.
He said this was for security reasons, to protect both of us from unnecessary exposure. Mitchell concluded the session by emphasizing the ongoing importance of Diana's cooperation. Diana, your information has been crucial in helping us understand this operation, but our investigation is far from over. We may need to speak with you again as we learn more about Morrison's network and identify other potential targets. As Diana was returned to her secure accommodation, Mitchell and Richardson began planning the next phase of their investigation. The discovery of surveillance equipment at multiple government facilities indicated that they were racing against time to identify and neutralize what appeared to be one of the most significant intelligence operations targeting the British government in recent years. Dr. Hayes presented her preliminary analysis of the Foreign Office surveillance equipment, confirming that it was nearly identical to what had been found at Clarence House. This level of consistency in equipment and installation methods strongly suggests central coordination and planning, she reported. Mitchell authorized the deployment of specialized counter-surveillance teams to begin discreet sweeps of other potential target facilities. The investigation was expanding rapidly, but the stakes were too high to risk overlooking any component of Morrison's intelligence network. As evening approached, the team realized that the midnight security breach detected by Marcus Thompson had uncovered something much larger and more threatening than a single compromised facility. They were now hunting an intelligence network that had successfully penetrated multiple layers of British government security, and time was running out to prevent potentially catastrophic damage to national security. 3 weeks after Marcus Thompson first detected the unusual electromagnetic signals at Clarence House, the investigation had expanded into one of the largest counterintelligence operations in recent British history. Commander Sarah Mitchell stood in the Secure Operations Center that had been established at Thames House, headquarters of the Security Service, coordinating what was now being called Operation Clearwater. The scope of the intelligence breach had grown far beyond what anyone had initially suspected. Surveillance equipment similar to what had been discovered at Clarence House and the Foreign Office had been found at 7 additional government facilities, including key locations within Whitehall, the Ministry of Defense, and Windsor Castle. Elizabeth Hayes presented her comprehensive technical analysis to the assembled team of investigators, intelligence officers, and security specialists. The surveillance network we've uncovered represents one of the most sophisticated intelligence operations ever detected on British soil, she reported. The consistency of equipment, installation methods, and operational procedures indicates central coordination by a highly professional organization. Detective Inspector Richardson had spent the past 3 weeks tracking down every lead generated by Diana Walsh's cooperation. The investigation had revealed a complex web of recruited assets, false identities, and operational safe houses scattered across London and surrounding areas. We've identified at least 12 individuals who were contacted by Morrison or his associates over the past 8 months, Richardson reported. Most were approached using similar methods to what Diana Walsh described, initial contact presenting as journalism or academic research, followed by gradual recruitment and escalating requests for access to sensitive facilities. Not all of the individuals who had been contacted had agreed to cooperate, but enough had provided assistance to enable the establishment of surveillance operations at multiple high-value targets. The pattern suggested a systematic intelligence gathering effort that had been planning and executing for considerably longer than 6 months. Mitchell reviewed the comprehensive case files that had been assembled. What's our current assessment of who's behind this operation? Richardson consulted his secure notes. The sophistication of the equipment, the professional recruitment methods, and the strategic targeting of facilities all point to a state-sponsored intelligence operation. The technical capabilities required for this type of surveillance network are beyond what most criminal organizations or non-state actors could manage. Dr. Kensing's office is bared on adopter field. Hayes added her technical perspective. The encryption methods and transmission protocols we've analyzed are consistent with advanced capabilities that are typically associated with major foreign intelligence services. However, we haven't been able to definitively attribute the operation to any specific country or organization. The breakthrough in the investigation came from an unexpected source. Marcus Thompson, the security supervisor whose vigilance had initiated the entire investigation, had continued monitoring electromagnetic signals throughout London using portable detection equipment. His off-duty surveillance had identified additional transmission anomalies at locations that hadn't been on the official investigation list. Marcus has detected what appears to be a central coordination facility in South London, Mitchell announced. The electromagnetic signatures suggest a location where multiple data streams are being collected and processed before being transmitted internationally. Richardson had been conducting surveillance of the South London location for 48 hours, using discrete observation methods to avoid alerting potential operatives to the investigation's progress. The facility appears to be operating as a legitimate technology consulting business, but our surveillance has identified activities that are inconsistent with normal commercial operations. Mitchell made the decision to execute simultaneous raids on the South London Coordination Facility and several other locations that had been identified through the investigation. The operation would require careful coordination to prevent the destruction of evidence and to maximize the chances of apprehending key operatives. At dawn on a cold February morning, specialized teams from the Counterterrorism Command and the Security Service converged on 6 locations across London. The primary target was the technology consulting business in South London, where Richardson and Dr. Hayes led the technical assessment team. The facility contained sophisticated computer equipment, encrypted communication systems, and what appeared to be a comprehensive intelligence analysis operation. Multiple workstations were displaying real-time feeds from surveillance networks at various government facilities, confirming that the discovered equipment represented only a portion of the overall intelligence-gathering operation. Dr. Hayes immediately began analyzing the computer systems to prevent the destruction of data and to understand the full scope of the intelligence operation. This facility has been collecting and processing surveillance data from at least 15 different government buildings, she reported. The volume of information that has been gathered is staggering. Among the documents and computer files recovered from the facility was evidence of a comprehensive intelligence operation that had been active for over 2 years. The surveillance networks at Clarence House and other recently discovered locations were actually expansion phases of a much larger and longer-running operation. Richardson discovered personnel files that confirmed the identities of several operatives who had been working under false identities, including the man who had recruited Diana Walsh under the name Peter Morrison. His actual identity was revealed to be Alexei Volkov, a career intelligence officer with extensive experience in technical surveillance operations. The raids resulted in the arrest of 8 individuals, including 3 people who appeared to be senior operatives responsible for coordinating the various surveillance networks. However, Alexei Volkov was not among those apprehended, suggesting that he had either fled the country or gone into deep cover. Commander Mitchell coordinated with international law enforcement agencies to track down Volkov and other operatives who had escaped the initial arrests. The evidence recovered from the South London facility provided detailed information about operational methods, target selection criteria, and communication protocols that would be valuable for identifying similar operations in other countries. Diana Walsh's cooperation during the investigation had proven invaluable, and her detailed information about Morrison's recruitment methods and operational procedures had been crucial in tracking down other compromised individuals and facilities. As a result of her assistance, the Crown Prosecution Service had agreed to reduce charges that would likely result in a suspended sentence and community service rather than imprisonment. Diana's cooperation saved us months of investigation time and probably prevented much more serious damage to national security, Mitchell noted. While her initial actions were certainly wrong, her willingness to help us understand and dismantle this operation demonstrated genuine remorse and commitment to protecting British interests. The technical analysis of the recovered intelligence revealed that the operation had been gathering comprehensive information about royal family activities, government decision-making processes, diplomatic communications, and security protocols. The potential uses for this information ranged from strategic political intelligence to operational planning for more serious hostile activities. Marcus Thompson received commendation for his alertness and professional dedication that had initiated the investigation. His willingness to investigate unusual electromagnetic signals during what should have been routine security monitoring had prevented what could have become an intelligence disaster of historic proportions. Marcus's vigilance and attention to detail exemplifies exactly the kind of professional dedication that protects our most important institutions, Richardson noted. Without his initial detection of those electromagnetic anomalies, this operation could have continued for years without discovery. The comprehensive security review that followed the investigation resulted in significant upgrades to electronic surveillance detection capabilities at all major government facilities. New protocols were implemented for background checks, access control, and ongoing monitoring of personnel who had access to sensitive areas. Dr. Hayes led the development of enhanced counter-surveillance technologies that would make it much more difficult for similar operations to be established in the future. The lessons learned from analyzing Morrison's sophisticated surveillance network provided valuable insights for protecting against advanced technical intelligence gathering methods. 6 months after the initial discovery at Clarence House, the full scope of Operation Clearwater's success became clear. The dismantled intelligence network had been one of the most comprehensive foreign surveillance operations ever detected in Britain, and its neutralization had prevented potentially massive damage to national security interests. International cooperation resulting from the investigation had led to the discovery and dismantling of similar operations in several Allied countries, suggesting that the London network had been part of a much larger global intelligence effort. The sharing of technical and operational intelligence with Allied services had significantly enhanced collective security capabilities. Diana Walsh completed her community service working with a charity that provided support for individuals who had been victims of manipulation and coercion. Her experience during the investigation had given her unique insights into how professional intelligence operatives recruited and managed assets, and she had become an effective advocate for improved awareness of these threats. Alexei Volkov remained at large, but international arrest warrants and comprehensive intelligence sharing had significantly limited his operational capabilities. The detailed understanding of his methods and techniques that had been developed during the investigation would make it much more difficult for him to establish similar operations in the future. Marcus Thompson continued his work as a security supervisor, but with enhanced responsibilities for electronic surveillance detection and counterintelligence coordination. His experience during the midnight security breach had demonstrated the critical importance of vigilant security personnel who understood both technical systems and operational security principles. Commander Mitchell reflected on the investigation's implications for national security in an increasingly complex technological environment. The sophistication of modern surveillance technology means that our security depends not just on physical barriers and traditional investigative methods, but on having personnel who understand how to detect and counter advanced technical threats. The midnight security breach that had begun with unusual electromagnetic signals in a quiet corner of Clarence House had revealed a vast intelligence operation that threatened some of Britain's most sensitive government functions. The successful investigation and dismantling of this network had required the coordinated efforts of multiple agencies, the cooperation of compromised individuals willing to assist the investigation, and the professional dedication of security personnel who remained vigilant even during routine overnight shifts. As London settled into another quiet night, security supervisors like Marcus Thompson continued their watchful monitoring of electromagnetic signals and surveillance equipment, knowing that the safety of democratic institutions often depended on their ability to detect the subtle signs of sophisticated threats. The midnight security breach had ended, but the vigilance it had demonstrated would continue protecting the nation's most important secrets for years to come. The investigation had shown that even the most secure facilities remained vulnerable to determined and well-resourced adversaries, but it had also demonstrated that professional security personnel, advanced detection technology, and coordinated investigative response could successfully counter even the most sophisticated intelligence operations. The lessons learned from Operation Clearwater would strengthen British security capabilities and enhance protection for the institutions that formed the foundation of democratic government.